Who's who? I'm not going to run through the list of people that are in the workshop. You can look at the participant list. I understand the ecosystem is small enough that we all ran into each other one way or the other before. But maybe one thing, since we're all highly educated people and it's before 10 o'clock and we're all in lockdown, maybe let's go on a first name basis to also cut down on time that we need to find the right person. So my name is Martin. When you introduce yourself, just go first name, if that's okay with everybody. Okay, sorry, just admitting our person. Other than that, during presentations, mute your microphone. Unless you're speaking, then please make sure that you have it on. If you have questions and you know how to find the raise your hand button in Zoom, that's useful. If not, put your questions in the chat and we'll pick it up there. And the same applies really for the roundtable. Again, if you know where the raise your hand button is in Zoom in your setup, use it or put the question in the chat. We're 23 people now, so I'm not expecting chaos in case somebody just wants to jump in, but okay, let's try to keep it this way if we can. Aims of the workshop and expectation. This is very, very quick. You've all got the booklet. We're trying to make this a conversation where everybody is really able to bring in their perspective, their experience in this space. We don't really have a set thing that we want at the end. It'd be great if we could, over the discussions, agree to some things where we're saying, look, that is really important, that is important, but we don't have enough information about it. Let's talk about this further. Or something where we're saying, look, this is something that we all agree on. Now, how do we get it out to the world to say, look, we agree on that and tell us that we're wrong. But at the moment, again, the aim is we're trying to have a conversation. We're trying to, in a way, educate ourselves about the experience and the perspectives of the other people in this workshop. Okay. That being said, let's maybe quickly run through the agenda. So we have a number of the agenda set up that we have a number of presentations, and then a roundtable discussion, and then a break, and then the same setup after. So we're now in the welcome and housekeeping. Hang on, can you go back on the slide? Sorry. So we're in the welcome and housekeeping. Then Fred will do a short introduction on what EBRA is. Then we have a quick round on where every cluster is able to introduce themselves and give a bit of background. Then Hella and I will dazzle you with our insights and perspectives on data sharing in brain research, preclinical and clinical. And then Damien will tell us about data governance, the legal and ethical considerations. And then we have our first roundtable discussion where Stephen is our moderator, and then a short break at 10:15. Okay, next slide, please. And that then continues with presentations by HPP speakers. So first off is Jan, who's going to talk about reproducible and transparent neuroscience. Then we have Philippe talking about leveraging really medical data and how do you share this. Then Petra will talk about brain simulation as a service, and Victor will then talk about how do you run large simulations on top of clinical data. Then again, a short break. Then we have a larger roundtable discussion. So we're talking here an hour, 20 minutes. And then over 15 minutes, we try to see what conclusions we have and what sensible next steps we can already propose. And that would be then the end of the workshop. We then, I guess, all jump into some form of lunch and continue with our day. Okay, I think that's all I got, at least in terms of content I got. And with that, I'd like to hand over to Fred. Fred, take it away, please.
Yes, thank you, Martin. So good morning, everyone. My name is Fred Destrebec. As we go by first names, Fred is way easier. Christine, can you pull up my slides, please?
Yes, one moment.
Yeah, thanks. So I was asked to provide an introduction on EBRA as a whole. So I'm presenting those slides on behalf of Professor Monica Di Luca, EBC president, who could not be with us and present an apology for this morning but wishes everybody a very good meeting. I'm also presenting on behalf of the team of our EBRA project team at EBC, so Christine Arts and Elke de Witte, who actually, yeah, perfect. Thank you very much. So can you move to the next slide, please? And just a word about the team is that Christine, myself, and Elke will be there to answer any question you may have along the meeting or even afterwards. So the EBRA consortium is made of different partners, EBC as coordinator, the Joint Programming on Neurodegenerative Diseases, the RNet Neuron, as well as the Human Brain Project. Next slide. So the aim, when EBRA was constituted, we responded to a call issued by the European Commission. This call was really aiming at avoiding fragmentation in the field, but also fostering connections and ultimately define common goals or shared priorities in the context of the project. Next slide. So in order to do that, EBRA is really organized around two levels of action. One that is, let's say, overarching and strategic in order to foster alignment and coordination of research strategies across those major large-scale initiatives funding brain research in Europe. But there is another level, more operational, and that's basically the one we are functioning at by organizing this type of workshop today, is really to support research communities and so-called clusters in specific research areas that we have then defined by issuing calls, as you could see. Next. And EBRA clusters, as we speak, are 6 today, and we would like to, on behalf of the organizing committee, welcome all of you representing a cluster and attending this workshop. Thank you very much for your participation. So we have the EPI cluster on epilepsy, trisomy 21, PREMOS on predictive model, PSMD on the prevention of severe mental disorders, brain foods, the link between brain health and nutrition, as well as ACIB, which was lastly confirmed, cluster on imaging biomarkers. So I can only wish you on behalf of our team a very nice meeting, very good discussions. And as said, feel free to reach out for any further information or clarification on the project as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you, Fred. Now we're at the point where we do quick introductions of the different clusters. So we'll have them one after the other. Next slide. I think we're starting with EPI cluster. Okay. There you go.
Can I show my own slides? Because I think I got these slides and I would like to show them. So I need to permission to share.
One second.
Sure, Asla. That's fine.
I can't share. Oh, okay. Okay, so you can see the slides?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm representing on behalf of Professor David Henshall from Dublin, who is our coordinator. So I'm presenting the EPI cluster. And my first name is Asla. And so the background of EPI cluster is that it was funded already in late 2019 as a 2-year action our primary objective is so all this is on epilepsy, both preclinical and clinical, is to establish a collaborative framework for the coordinated actions of epilepsy across Europe. And that's based on shared partnerships and priorities. The key objectives are to maintain cooperation. So before actually this EpiCluster was created, we had already established so-called Epi-Exchange consortium that included several large-scale European projects that had got funding. And we joined the forces together, and now we are bringing in new partnerships and projects and stakeholders. So together we agree priorities, and then we work toward addressing these priorities in Europe and beyond. And of course, what is important for all of us is to kind of work towards attracting and even generating new funding instruments and obtain funding. So what are our data sharing gaps and needs? So the first one is to enhance resource sharing among research groups. And we have basically biological materials, data banks, IPSELs, etc. We have in silico, in vitro, and in vivo models. And then we already have various types of big data like omics, digitized EEG, and MRI, so different types of data sets. And we would like to establish mechanisms for their safe and effective exchange. So, of course, this would require a certain level of standardization, harmonization, and storage. Basically, the goal is to generate the European epilepsy data ecosystem. But particularly with this stage, that is going to be, as we all know, a big challenge. And we have some experience already about that. Eventually, all this aims at developing operational preclinical trial network. So basically, this discussion about doing preclinical multicenter studies is new. It's already ongoing in the epilepsy field in some projects, but and we have some experience about that. But it is quite a challenge. But this is needed to be able to have animal numbers high enough to get powered to obtain statistical power. And then also it's not just preclinical, but also enhanced clinical trial structures for epilepsy in Europe based on e-health and genetic clinical phenotyping tools to enable patient stratification. So this was basically in brief what we do.
Great, thank you, Asla. I think the next class drop is PSMD.
Yes, hello, that's me. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, Eva.
Yeah, very nice. Hello, my name is Eva Reininghaus. I'm professor of psychiatry in Austria, and I'm representing in behalf of Paolo Fusapoli and Ole Andreasen today the PSMD cluster. The PSMD cluster is the prevention of severe mental disorders cluster, and it was funded by EBRA in 2020, building on two existing networks of the European College of Neuropsychopharmacology, the ECNP, namely one network of prevention of mental disorders and mental health promotion, and the other one is the Bipolar Disorders Networks. I'm also the co-chair of the Bipolar Disorders Network of the ECNP. So it's a 2-year action to enhance the coordination of PSMD research in Europe. And the main aims of the PSMD cluster include, first, the fostering collaboration of experts with multidisciplinary background in the field of mental disease, with the focus on preventive and precision medicine, but importantly also fostering the collaboration of different already existing networks and working groups on this topic. And we are also facilitating the dialogue with stakeholders and industry, supporting grant applications and dissemination of the results of funded projects. And the second aim, second most important aim, is to support innovative translational research from basic to clinical and public health research, and what is important for the benefit of patients, so that prevention of severe mental disorders and care for established bipolar disorders can be improved. So the BSMD cluster is the first European infrastructure that specifically aims at improving the prevention of mental disorders and the promotion of good mental health with a focus on severe mental disorders, meaning schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, and major depressive disorder. So next slide, please. So as we are a network of international experts and even more of already existing working groups on this topic, it's especially important for our work that we also deal with data sharing gaps and needs. So we try to standardize core assessment, outcome measures, and interventional research strategies for the promotion of good mental health in Europe, and create a common computerized research database enabling multinational data management. And this goes, of course, in line with strategies to ensure full protection of the sensitive data, but also that participants should be able to control the data that they have provided. So that work on systems for own your own data, so that participants should be able also, for example, to withdraw from studies easily. Yeah, so we hope and are convinced that with this initiative and cluster, we can disseminate a preventive culture in clinical psychiatry and translate precision medicine and research into improved healthcare for severe mental disorders. Thank you.
Thank you, Eva. The next cluster is Trisomy 21. Mara?
Yeah. Hi, thank you very much. My name is Mara Deersen, and I am presenting the Trisomy 21 cluster, also in the name of my co-chair, Dr. Marie-Claude Potier, and all the members. We are more than 20 members in the cluster. Can you go to the next, please? Thank you. So the Trisomy 21 cluster was funded by EBRA in 2020. This is a 2-year networking action as the others. And the idea, the basic idea is to be able to enhance the coordination of Down syndrome research in Europe and create a European agenda for Down syndrome and other intellectual disabilities, and including also neurodegenerative disorders that are related to Down syndrome, such as Alzheimer's disease. And among our objectives, we have the need to expand the clinical and preclinical, because this embraces both preclinical research and also clinical research across Europe, and be able to initiate collaborative research among us and with other intellectual disabilities and Alzheimer's disease. We need, as the others, also to harmonize and standardize protocols, both for preclinical research and also for clinical research in Down syndrome. And the idea, the basic idea, and we had already our first activity, that was the consensus meeting, was to coordinate efforts with research strategies across Europe and also expand those at a more global level. So our network was also incorporating the European College of Neuropsychopharmacology network called Down syndrome and other genetic developmental disorders. And it also embraces the first and unique scientific society for Down syndrome research, that is the Trisomy 21 Research Society. We are very much connected also with patients through the European Down Syndrome Association. And as I said, the more concrete aims are to, of course, address challenges of research, favor the knowledge of existing infrastructures in Europe, and provide better access to biosamples, bioresources in general. So not just biosamples of patients, but also mouse models and cellular models, etc. We want to establish a clinical trial network on Down syndrome. We need patient registries. We want to also expand the liaison with industry partners. And of course, part of the aims, the specific aims are also to create opportunities for training young researchers and discuss funding opportunities. We have several activities. The consensus meeting was held in November. We have now ongoing 2 more activities that are led by specific thematic groups on Down syndrome research priorities and on a strategy to link with policymakers and relevant stakeholders. And finally, we will have a public forum for the EBRA Trisomy 21 cluster to communicate our activities and conclusions to everyone, to the general public and also to stakeholders, etc. Can you go to the next? Thank you. In terms of data sharing gaps, we have many are common to what has been already said by the others, right? In our case, we really need to create international Down syndrome data sets and registries because this is not yet there. It's scattered all around in different databases, but it's not really easy to manage or to find. Then we need also to have repositories of models, animal models, cellular repositories, and the associated data sets. And again, here we have a similar problem. It's very difficult to find ways of really sharing the data in a consistent way with adequate metadata, etc., etc. But we will discuss this later, right? So we need to really standardize the data and also the analysis pipelines. Also, we think that it's important to share not just big data coming from big projects, but also small and more heterogeneous data sets produced by individual groups, right? And we wanted also to kind of put on the table for discussion later the need for incentives, right? Because it's a lot of work to put data sets together in a consistent and reliable way, in a fair way. We think that it would be important to recognize this work somehow, no? And also clarify how that data will be reused, which is not always clear. Of course, the idea would be to have biomedical informatic tools for linking and analyzing diverse types of data, so the integration across different scales, different levels of data, and different quality of data, right, from multiple sources. And the idea, of course, would be to create, as has also been said by others, biomedical research data ecosystem for Down syndrome. Thank you.
Thank you, Mara. That gets us to Cluster Premos.
Right, thank you very much. So my name is Sabine Hölter. I coordinate the Premos cluster together with Janne Roh, who is also on this call. And the Premos cluster consists of 3 consortia who have joined forces. If you go to the next slide, you can see this. So we all share a common goal. We all want to improve the translational value of animal models in neuropsychiatric research. Now, translation from insights of preclinical studies in animal models to humans can fail because of multiple reasons, but one can roughly put them into 2 categories. They can either fail because of neurobiology-related reasons. For example, disease mechanisms are unclear and the study addresses aspects that are not really causal for the disease, or because the biological mechanism is not conserved between the species being studied in humans, or, and that is the other category, they can fail because the animal studies are not designed, performed, or interpreted well enough. That would be a data quality related reason. One of the Premos partners, the EQIPT consortium, which you can see here on the right, is a preclinical data quality consortium with global outreach that focuses on finding solutions for data quality related issues. The second partner, PRISM, works on solutions for neurobiology-related reasons. PRISM is an IMI-funded European consortium of clinicians and neurobiologists with deep knowledge of the brain and its development, who try to find quantifiable biological parameters that are relevant across the disorders major depression, schizophrenia, and Alzheimer's disease, and back translate those parameters identified in patients, for example, in the domains of sensory processing or social behavior, to the studies in animal models. And the third partner is Infrafrontier, which is a consortium of the European mouse clinics with global outreach, because they are also members of the International Mouse Phenotyping Consortium, IMPC. Infrafrontier is a research infrastructure that has already established a lot of quality measures on mouse model production as well as on phenotyping. And due to its expertise in genetics, it can address improving translation by producing precision mouse or rat models, for example, once disease-causing variants are identified by clinicians, and also with respect to comorbidities, because Infrafrontier has unrivaled experience with comprehensive systemic phenotyping of mouse models that addresses all organ systems. So PREMOS starts with improving rodent models because this is where the expertise of the partners lies, but is by no means limited to that. We are open to expanding the debate about how best to improve translation to other model systems, also considering the role of in vitro and in silico approaches, but we want to start where we have the most expertise. If you go to the next slide, please. Concerning data sharing, we've only identified legal problems, mainly concerning IP rights in projects between academia and industry, because Infrafrontier phenotyping data is already publicly available via the IMPC webpage, which is hosted by the EBI. But we have an interest in discussing data integration of complex data sets, for example, all kinds of phenotype and omics data. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you. And that gets us to the ECIB cluster. And
thank you. Yes, very pleased to be able to present this today, also on behalf of Stefano Cappo, who's also on board here. So next slide, please. So this is a cluster that is primarily a cluster of already existing imaging projects on the European level, so JP&D, Horizon 2020 imaging projects, but also ARANET Neuron. And in addition, some international or also national networks are involved. And as I said, mostly it's the PIs of these networks who were identified and then came together for this proposal and the EKIP consortium here. So neuroimaging biomarkers are evidently a very dynamic and evolving field, and they provide opportunities on many levels, from the understanding of the natural brain states of human beings to translational research, but in the end also as a diagnostic instrument in clinical practice. So it's a complicated spread of use cases that we face here, and big data approaches. So the collection of hundreds and hundreds of data, multi-centric data, is obviously both a challenge and an opportunity. And so it needs the collection, the curation, the transfer of data. Many things have already been mentioned in the other presentations here. So among the multiple domains of these approaches, we decided that we should come together and also identify additional gaps and challenges from the perspectives of the PIs. So, usually the gaps and the hurdles that are identified are technical or legal. But we also wanted to have the PI perspective very much in the focus. And one example would be exactly what has been mentioned, the incentive. So what is the incentive for the individual researcher to invest in the collection of data that might be then shared on a platform free to use for anybody? So that's a problem that needs to be tackled, but we also wanted to open the panel again, basically to identify other non-technical, non-legal gaps. Next slide, please. So we again, this is more or less what's been said. I don't want to repeat everything again. It's mostly the same problem that others have repeatedly claimed as a problem. But again, I think that the legal aspects are difficult to tackle, but we are researchers, so we're not legal experts. So I think we can provide insights into why or what we want to do, and then the legal aspects need to be resolved someplace else. So that's about what I wanted to say. We're starting right now, so it's a very new cluster here, and also the timeline is a bit shorter than in the other cluster. So we have limited resources in both in money and time that we will spend on exactly identifying maybe novel gaps that need to be closed. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And that concludes the introduction of the clusters, which gets us now to my colleague Hella on the first part of data sharing in brain research, preclinical and clinical data.
So, very good morning from my side as well. My name is Hella. I'm representing the ERANET Neuron. And ERANET Neuron is a network of 25 funding organizations from Europe, but also associated countries like Norway, Israel, and globally from Canada and Taiwan, and also Turkey is the partner in ERANET Neuron. So one of the key elements of ERANET Neuron are the joint transnational calls. These joint transnational calls are launched annually, and they do range from sensory disorders to mental health and methodology, and they cover both preclinical and clinical research. Also, we are a partner in the EBRA network as a funders network. And as you all know, brain research in Europe is a rapidly evolving field. And as a funding network, Neuron has funded international research consortia to develop novel tools and approaches to advance the understanding of unknown basic brain functions, to generate novel therapeutic approaches, as well working on ethical, legal, and societal aspects. And the complexity of physiological brain functions and brain diseases will be a driver for further discovery and innovation. But despite the generation of considerable amount of knowledge and also innovative approaches, the translation into new health intervention is rather scarce. And we think that the effective and efficient collaboration and cooperation are often identified as key factors to achieve full impact from the brain research that we are funding. And in particular, there's a constant need for strengthening the information flow and accelerating the exchange of experience on past and ongoing projects. As a funders network, ERANET Neuron is strongly dedicated to promote the highest possible standards of rigor and integrity of data, and it's really important because we have to maintain public trust in science. That is a major issue, as many of you have been also become aware during the COVID pandemic. So on the one hand, we do spend taxpayers' money, and on the other hand, we have a responsibility for ensuring that the research we fund is trustable and reproducible and supports integrity. So to ensure that research is conducted according to appropriate ethical, legal, and professional framework and standards is also a key element. And we want to support a culture of integrity, good governance, best practice, and researcher development, because also we have a key element in funding early career researchers in supporting their promotion. So FAIR principles refer to 3 types of data entities: data of any digital object, metadata, and infrastructure. And the principles usually emphasize machine actionability because humans increasingly rely on computational support to deal with data. And data is an increasing resource both in terms of volume and complexity. And also, of course, a third dimension is the creation speed of the generation of new data. So what can funders do? What we strive to is that we develop policies, but also provide guidance for our researchers. We want to improve our peer review system constantly according to the needs. We want to have greater emphasis on the methodology in funding applications, and we do support statistics and experimental design. That is something we do together with EBRA. We have quality assurance workshops, and there will be some further 2 workshops in the autumn of this year, and we will be very happy to invite the clusters particularly for these workshops, and not only the early career researchers, but also the principal investigators. And detailed explanation will follow in writing later this year to the cluster principal investigators. And what we want to do is we want to promote high quality reporting of results and data, and also in repositories for usability of generated data. And of course, what we want to do is we want to promote education and training. Again, as I said, with the training workshops together with EBRA. And with that, I thank you very much. Refer to our website and hand back to Martin. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hella. Okay, sorry, just fighting Zoom for slides. Okay, let's try this. Okay, so the second part of this presentation, I remember coming up with the title of it, Data Sharing in Brain Research, Preclinical and Clinical Data. I was thinking, how hard could it be to put a couple of slides together on this? And you'd be surprised. I mean, I think you actually wouldn't be that surprised, because from a lot of your introductions, I'm seeing that a number of you are fighting in this space valiantly across the border of neuroscience, and let's call it medical informatics. So I put together 2 slides just as an overview, and please tell me where I'm terribly wrong, but this is the picture that I'm seeing. So if we split preclinical and clinical, we're talking what people generally refer to as neuroscience or neurobiology, and for the most part, medical informatics. Now, when we're talking about standards in neuroscience, well, they're community-based mostly, because you have a quick turnover of tools in some cases, and development of tools that a lot of times outpace what is happening with clinical data, where it's a lot of times really tied to the production cycles of different tools that allow this data capture. Organismal complexity, well, in neuroscience, there's 5 to 10 popular organisms, really. And let's ignore the single cell things where we say they have a nervous system, but they don't really. Whereas in clinical data, we're really talking about a single organism. Demographic sampling, neuroscience is heavily biased towards a number of data points around certain age groups that are of interest. You don't go as wide on demographic sampling, whereas in clinical data, it's the entire spectrum really from the very beginning to the very end. Now, data coverage, there's no real sampling constraints in neuroscience. If you can get it past the people that check the animals' protocols, it's fair game. And when it comes to methods, it's a bit of the Wild West. All you need to do is open up 3 papers and see how would you be able to reproduce that, even if you had the full protocol, and how do you compare the data. Whereas with clinical data, there's a sampling constraint definitely, because you can't do everything and make sure that the patient walks away happy from the sampling. And the methods are much more standardized from what I can tell. Now, human data in neuroscience, I would say, is generally accessible. let's ignore GDPR here for a second, but we're not talking about a lot of hurdles. Consent from the patient is, or from the subject is usually good enough. And with clinical data, let's just call it limited. There's a lot more constraints and a lot more things going on what is shareable and what is not shareable. Now, where are we going? Because this is kind of like, where the picture at the moment. So in neuroscience, I see that modeling and analysis is really starting to pick up compared to where we were 10 years ago. So a number of the presentations you're going to see after are talking about what do we not just do with the data, but what do we do with the data when it comes to modeling of saying what data do you take for input, what data do you use for validation, these kinds of things. So this is becoming more common, it's less of an outlier. With clinical data sharing, well, welcome to a post-COVID medical informatics situation where policy makers are relying on accurate data and understanding what some of the analysis actually mean for them to be able to take sensible next steps. And COVID is just an urgent example, but I expect that after being in this space for more than a year, this will bleed over into other decision-making processes that are not linked to the current crisis as well. Now, with respect to tech, there are data sharing platforms in neuroscience that are mostly driven by publishers, because it's increasingly becoming fashionable to say, here's a link to my data, or here's a link to my process data when it comes to publishing. There are data platforms creeping up from tech companies that are saying, use the Amazon Glacier to store your big data sets, and then community-based ones, which are largely data aggregation efforts around specific types of data or specific formats. So this is already happening. You have islands of data processed and pre-processed popping up. With respect to clinical data, it seems it's a really complicated service ecosystem with a lot of single-purpose solutions that at times feel like they're driven by people that provide a certain machine to say you can store your data too, and you can share it with other people that are also part of that ecosystem. But it feels like a lot of single-purpose solutions. It seems like a beginning, but there's yet a way to go. Now, data sharing collaborations in neuroscience, again, compared to 10 years ago, really the adoption of ICT is pushing this forward. And it's pushing it exactly in the direction that a lot of the policy people were hoping for a decade ago, into more open, reproducible research. I'm saying more because it's not there yet, but it's definitely better than it was a decade or 2 decades ago. And with clinical data, again, I know Hella is shaking her head now, but that's part of the discussion, Hella. It's not part of the presentation. Now, for clinical, again, this feels like there's an increasingly urgent need to figure out how we're going to get better at data sharing. But again, this is not a simple picture, and what to share and what is meaningful information and what isn't meaningful information, but is easily shareable. Now, pushes that are on the way to change this, I think in neuroscience, you're seeing that there's a number of different sides that are moving this forward, and again, at different levels. You have the European European Open Science Cloud. You have standardization efforts that are, for example, pioneered by the INCF. You have the Allen Brain Institute producing data sets freely available for anybody with a shared methodology and antibodies. I mean, that was revolutionary when they first said, okay, we're just going to offer what we're doing, the data and the antibodies, have at it. And then places like HPP and EBRAINS that are trying to make solutions from researchers, by researchers, for researchers available, and see what is the uptake and what are the different parts of neuroscience that are ready for that, and what are the parts that still need time to hold together and build critical mass. With clinical data, I would say it's starting. But it's slowed down really by the complexity of national regulatory frameworks. There are a sea of anecdotal stories, really, where people say, I have data, I'd like to share it with somebody that's 10 kilometers away from me, and I can't because between us, somebody drew a line on a map, and we just can't, even though the data would fit on a USB stick. So I think where we are is we see that the picture is changing. It's not there where we're completely happy where it's going, but I consider this a decent attempt of trying to get us going in this workshop and to get to the next presentation, which is Damien, who will tell us about some of the data policies. Sorry, how do I get out of full screen mode? And then into the first discussion that we have in this workshop. Thank you very much. And Damien, take it away.
Yeah, thank you. Marisa, can you share the slides? Okay. I'm Damien Eke, the Data Governance Coordinator for the HBP. I'm happy to be here today to talk a little bit about data governance, responsible data governance. It is important to know that I've used the concept of responsible data governance here, rather than just data governance, to denote a governance framework that integrates the principles of responsible research and innovation within a transparent but dialogical process. I will explain this, but let's talk about the meaning of data governance. Next slide, please. In the HPP, our understanding of data governance is that it refers to the principles, procedures, and policies that ensure acceptable and responsible processing of data in each stage of the data lifecycle: collection, storage, processing, curation, sharing, archiving, and use to deletion. These principles shape data management, how data is made accessible, usable, and secure. This definition highlights the role data governance plays in the obvious tension between criticality and risk, the tension between data availability and protection for both humans and animals involved in the research. While the increasing availability of neuroscience data holds great potentials, as we have heard in some of the earlier presentations, for advancing scientific discoveries, there are normative challenges that demand careful considerations to ensure data protection principles are respected and the integrity of the data is preserved. It is data governance that balances this imperative for open data with the ethical and legal duty or obligation to preserve confidentiality and protect data against misuse, including discrimination and other forms of risk to research subjects and the society at large, and also ensure equitable access and benefits, considering the future innovation trajectories or the potential for misuse of research subjects in neuroscience. Data governance helps to maintain data integrity, quality, availability, accessibility, usability, security, and also it helps to define the roles and responsibilities related to data. Last year, the European Commission published its draft of the Data Governance Act as one of the deliverables included in the Commission's 2020 European Strategy for Data. This act was created with the intention of developing a framework that will encourage greater reuse of public sector data, but by increasing trust in data intermediaries and strengthening the various data sharing mechanisms across the EU, which for me underline the core functions of data governance, something that facilitates sharing for advancement of science, but also aligns science with public good and provides protection for data subjects and trust in scientific outcomes. Next slide, please. It is true that there's a growing availability of neuroscience data from large and small scale projects, which is driving unprecedented, for me, advancements in neuroscience and innovation as well. We are talking about big data, but also we're talking about multiple types of data, as we have also heard earlier on. Neuroscience data spans multiple data types: clinical, genetic, behavioral, imaging, ex vivo and in vivo measurements of multiple species of human and non-human animals. They are also becoming very multifunctional because with the increased scientific understanding of the brain, there is also a parallel increase in the utility of neurodata in AI innovations and also a number of consumer products in health and entertainment and marketing. Another aspect of neurodata is also that it's generated and interact with different cultures and different legal principles. There are also the possibilities of modeling these days. All these elements of neurodata have increased the ethical and legal scrutiny on neuroscience data, the ethical dilemmas on how neuroscience data can be shared or used, particularly when ethical guidelines and views may differ across countries or regions. For me, the unprecedented possibilities with neurodata, including possibilities of neuroprediction and neuromarketing, have also led a few scholars to start discussing the exceptionalism of neurodata and considerations of neuro rights. This is why data governance framework that can drive value creation in neuroscience, but can also help to mitigate risk and enhance ethical and legal compliance is needed. Next slide, please. But the question is, what issues does data governance framework cover? Data governance covers all issues that prevent data sharing, issues that have impact on the usability, quality, and integrity of the data for scientific discovery, and also issues that undermine the confidentiality and privacy of research participants. These issues can be grouped into ethical issues, legal issues, and technical issues. The list here is not exhaustive, but indicates some of the issues under these groups. The major issue here is to find the motivation to go beyond legal requirements. Some of the ethical issues associated with neuroscience data are not provided for in the law. How then does a researcher find it necessary to address these issues, find the motivation to do it? We can all agree that addressing these issues improve the social acceptability of scientific results. In the HBP, we find motivations in public good, the principle of transparency, and also fair data requirements, and also the EC's requirements on responsible research and innovation. Next slide, please. As highlighted by the definition of data governance, which I talked about earlier on, this is something that happens in each stage of the data lifecycle. It doesn't happen in one stage of the data lifecycle. It covers all issues from all the stages, collection to deletion, because what happens in each of these stages can prevent sharing. Sharing does not happen in isolation of the other stages. Consent, for instance, can prevent sharing. Indeed, as maybe many of us know, many neurodata that cannot be shared today is because they do not have consent requirements that can fulfill the GDPR provisions. This is different from informed consent required for scientific research. There's also the issue of anonymization, pseudonymization, or de-identification as it is known in the American data protection lexicon. While GDPR does not regulate anonymized data, allowing easy sharing, pseudonymized data remains personal data and under the provisions of the GDPR. Most importantly, for neuroscience data, it is still very debatable whether neuroimaging data can be anonymized, since they contain unique brain prints that are identifiable. So each stage of the data lifecycle involves aspects of ethics, law, and technical issues that can affect sharing. Next slide, please. One key issue for research collaborations, such as EBRA clusters or the HBP, where different EU institutions come together for a project, is the determination of a data controller. This is about identifying which legal entity, alone or jointly with others, determines the purposes and means of the processing of the personal data. For a collaborative research project, this is difficult and something that should be considered on a case-by-case basis. But a recent EDPB guideline provides an example of what can happen within a research project that is not a legal entity. Often in a research project, discussions on who is responsible for this or who is liable for that is always an interesting one. But this example makes it a little bit clearer on how this particular processing can be viewed. If institutions come together and use a particular platform, they can be jointly liable for that as joint controllers. This is an example of what can happen in a collaborative project, but there may be other types of processing that deserve further considerations in a research project. Next slide, please. So, what then is an effective data governance framework for research? Data governance is about using the right people to establish and implement the right policies and procedures using the right available technology. But I'm going to talk about how this looks for HBP. Next slide, please. how does this look for HBP? For us, HBP is a large, complex, collaborative, but an international project. It possesses attributes requiring special consideration, which, when incorporating ethical principles, including the need for a non-imperialistic but a dialogical approach, sensitive to social and cultural issues at multiple levels. We therefore prioritize dialogues with researchers rather than an imperialistic top-down approach. For the people, we have established structures that help to create policies and procedures together with the researchers. One is the Data Governance Working Group, led by the Infrastructure Operations Director, the Ethics Director. Then members include the Data Protection Officer, a Compliance Manager, and representatives from all work packages and service categories. There is also the Access Review Committees and the Curation Access Review Committee that establish procedures that ensure responsible access and use of the EBRAINS research infrastructure. The dialogical interactions with all the relevant stakeholders lead to processes that contribute to responsible data governance. These include a data policy manual that is available online, our access policy that is also available online, privacy policy, a data provision protocol, data use agreements, data processing agreements, dual use opinion that talked about the responsible dual use of neuroscience outcomes, data protection impact assessment that we do, and a lot of trilateral and bilateral meetings. In cases of breach of ethical and legal principles, the HBP also has a point of registration, what we call a POS system, which is used to register and identify these issues and keep track of how they are dealt with. For technology, we have established a privacy by design or by default approach that comprises of pseudonymization techniques. We make sure that only pseudonymized data are shared via the EBRAINS platform, and encryption approaches as additional privacy measures. Finally, the Human Data Gateway, which is a technical solution to implement access control model of authentication, agreement, and authorization, to also address challenges associated with neurodata usability and accessibility. The HBP EBRAINS have also created Open Minds Initiative for Neuroscience Data Structures, or what we call Open Minds, which develops and maintains a set of metadata models for research products in the field of neuroscience. I think the first of its kind for all types of neurodata data. Next slide, please. But then what are the benefits of data governance for a collaborative project? This includes the provision as guidance for individual researchers. It is often easy for individual researchers to be confused on what to do or how to comply with requirements of the GDPR especially. So data governance helps to guide individual researchers on what to do. It also helps to clarify responsibilities and liabilities for partner institutions. It also helps to ensure responsible sharing, which in turn increases the possibility of maximizing the potentials of data by improving consistency and transparency and security of the data. And finally, it helps to comply with requirements of science for public good. So all these and many other detailed information about our approach to responsible data governance can be found in some of the resources in the next slide. So if you want more detail on what we do and how we do this, these resources will also help in that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Damien. And that leads us into the first discussion. We're a bit over time, but I would say let's keep going and potentially cut the break down to 5 minutes instead of 10. Stephen, take us away.
Yes. Okay. Good. So we're a bit over time, but just so we have two roundtable discussions. It's your discussion, so I'm going to do the difficult thing for me, which is trying to shut up as much as possible. But a couple of house rules. We are using high high-tech instruments here, but there are some limitations to it. So Zoom only allows one person to actually make noise. So in that sense, could you raise your hand either through the tool or on the video so that I know that you want to address the question or the topic? And if possible, if you have questions, as some of you are already doing to my colleagues, send them on the chat so that we can actually address them. But I've not seen any of those questions, Martin. I don't know where they are. I would like to, I've heard a couple of very interesting points and I would like to address them, but let's in this first session concentrate a bit on what was said in the previous discussions or in the previous slides. So I want to take back a couple of points that were mentioned in the cluster presentations and reflect back to what Damien actually said. It came back several times, like the legal aspects of sharing data. And it seems okay. It's a bit of a bottleneck, it seems, or a hurdle, or something where people are afraid from. So I would like actually that the clusters actually come back on that point and see if what Damien actually presented is an answer to that, or actually takes it a bit further away. So maybe shall we start with Aske? What's your opinion on that? Did she hear me? Is she still there?
Well, there are several raised hands.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I don't see, yeah, okay. I see several raised hands indeed. Let's start at the top. I see Tilo, you have you raised your hand.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep.
Very interesting discussion and topics, but the first point I'd like to address here is actually not regarding legal aspects, but regarding this this forum and this presentation. Since you record it, and it's quite interesting to us all, I guess. Would it be possible to share this recording with all of us? That would be one question. And then I have a comment on the data sharing. It's obviously quite a complicated issue in the legal aspects, in the legal domains. And I'd like to share with you just a sentiment. It's not a solution, it's just a sentiment. And maybe many research leaders probably share this view, that in recent years we have seen a large increase in the administrative work in almost every aspect of our work. And at the same time, we have an increasing body of people at our institutions who are involved with these aspects, administrative arm of the institutions. And the sentiment that I have is that the more people there are working on these aspects, the more we need to work to make it work. Because I don't think that in general, it really, sometimes it seems that these situations create more problems than solutions. So everybody has their own view on things and everybody has their own things to pitch in. And at the same time, I think that something that maybe goes with that is that it creates kind of a diffusion of responsibility. So there are, not only with that data sharing aspect, but with many other aspects as well, it's hard to find a person that actually takes responsibility for anything. And this will create, I think, I have a great fear that this will create a critical threat that is more and more causing or making it virtually impossible to create interesting large-scale projects with data sharing. That's just a sentiment, sorry.
Stephen, you need to unmute yourself.
Yeah, good point. We're using this for 1 year and I'm still not used to it. No, so first on your first point, Thilo, I asked the organizers actually to comment on that. Do we share the recording?
Let's. I was going to bring that up under the next steps. Let's postpone that. But yes, if we can't sort it out, we'll sort it out by email. Okay, good. Yeah. I'm not going to comment on your second point because I promised to shut up. So I'm going to just ask Hella. Maybe you've raised your hand, so maybe you want to comment on that point.
Well, yes, in one point, I like to support Thilo because we as funders know that the administrative work for researchers is ever increasing, and that really distracts them a bit from their original work for what they set out to have, particularly that career. Yeah, we try to diminish as much as possible, but usually our hands are bound as well. And this is something I would like to let you all know, but because you possibly do not know this, as we get some funding from the EU, so ERANET Neuron is also funded by the European Commission, and we ourselves as a network do have to provide a data management plan as well. And concerning the point that Damien made for a data controlling, we have to construct and sign a data controlling agreement. So because we do collect data from researchers, but also from speakers, from early career scientists. So we go through all the hassle ourselves. So, and with us, the data controlling is every funding agency. And so the responsibilities, and this is a point where I do not agree with Thilo. I mean, we are one of the really largest networks, and with us, the responsibility is clearly defined because that is in the data controlling agreement, and we have to provide that. That for us, it's a deliverable. There's no way out. And therefore, we do see the point that the work, the administrative work is ever increasing, but in the greater good, I think it defines more the responsibilities and it clarifies roles. And in the end, it does secure the public and the citizens and the researchers themselves. You do not want that your data that you submitted for us for a proposal go around the world and be known to everybody. We keep them secret and they are confidential and we are obliged to keep them confidential. So we really want to secure all our clients. Well, that was it. Thank you.
Maybe I just want to clarify something. I didn't mean that there's that the ERANET Neuron or any European institution doesn't take any responsibility. What I meant is that if you have an administrative problem at my institution and probably at each one of yours, yeah, there are different people involved and everybody has their, the more fragmented
the small corridor.
The more you need to basically work yourself to bring it all together. That's what I wanted to say.
Yeah, agreed. Thank you.
Damien, can I ask you to comment? Yeah.
Yes, I want to comment on this, first of all, about the fear and also what researchers are able to accept for themselves. The fear itself, there are two ways to it. What it can do is to make you to try to anonymize the data more, thereby damaging the scientific utility of the data. Or you stop sharing. But I don't think that's the way to go because there are legitimate ways of sharing that will not get you into trouble with the GDPR. And that's what we need to understand. Secondly, is about what researchers can accept to actually term themselves. Whether you're a controller or a processor does not depend on what you call yourself, but it depends on what you do. If you do not understand the processes that you're taking to be identified as a data controller, then you need maybe a data protection officer, a DPO, to maybe identify that for you. Because each research institution or each research project, at least at some point of the data processing stage, is either a joint controller with somebody or a sole controller for the data they collect and use. And also, it has been raised in other international cycles. What can help individual researchers might be a data governance tool, a technical tool that can help researchers identify what they need to do at each stage of the data processing cycle.
Okay. I think, Jan, you also raised your hand, so I think you want to bring some insight on how we can actually help in that area as well, I think. Yeah. Jan.
Thank you for giving me this, this opportunity to...
Sorry, we have two Jans. Okay.
Sorry.
No, you go ahead. Sorry. So yeah, I was talking to Yambiali. So Yambiali, if you can please comment.
Okay, thank you. So yes, so in my role as infrastructure development director now in the HBP and working with establishing the EBRAINS research infrastructure, I think the comment from Thilo is very much appreciated. It is a key starting point because a lot of what we're doing is simply to try to dig our way through that complexity to find solutions. And the only way to do it is to have time windows, because endless discussions are meaningless, to have decision makers who make sure we can go forward step by step, and to work with people like Damien, who has the complexity and knows everything in the iceberg below the water surface. But we don't need to know all of that, but we need to work with the experts to solve it. That's what we're trying to do. And without your comment, Thilo, we will get nowhere. It's absolutely critical. And we're going to discuss it later today as well.
Okay, thank you. So Jan Eero, since I interrupted you, now it's your turn.
Okay, thank you. I have several comments. Because I think we are trying to embrace a field which is quite emerging at the moment, and there are many initiatives here which are interfering at different levels. And it was very nice to hear about all the aspects that you describe for the data sharing and the data controlling. But I'm also facing another point. So when I'm producing data, and that I may have any let's say, opportunity to valorize my data sets going to more, let's say, a clinical perspective, I need to go through the valorization procedures in my institute. So, and this is a bit imbalanced because you have to keep those data confidential while you are working with public money and you should deliver at the end open science. So I think we should really, so this is another level of complexity that has not been, I think, discussed yet. But I think we should really, if we want to make progress on this data sharing, try to envisage intervention at different steps of the data life cycle, because the questions are not the same. And at the moment, everything is coming at the same time, and you don't really how you can start really dealing with this process, or you can propose a nice way to handle at least most recurrent questions. So these are things that I would like maybe you to focus on, and to be certainly more specific on neuroscience data, because of course there are many other initiatives in the omics fields where they are describing new repositories, new standards, and we should really focus on that, because this is quite an aspect that should be maybe a big push forward. And we have heard from the different clusters that there are already some thought around that. So that's my own opinion. Thank you.
Anybody want to react to that immediately? I see Jan Bialy raising his hand.
I hope I'm not taking anyone's here, but it's so tempting to comment because yes, we are exactly working on it. And the comment could be that several of the cluster presentations here actually really indicates that we should directly interact one-to-one to look at very concrete opportunities. They are there regarding neuroscience specific, regarding standards or metadata schemas and ways to deal with any type of neuroscience data within the context of a very systematic approach to organized data sharing. So we'll touch upon it after the break.
Okay, Marie-Claude, you also had a point to mention.
Yes, Thank you. I just wanted to go back to this data managing plan that we are doing for each project, and I think it could be a good start to maybe to add some points to this DMP, or to to start on something that we are already doing and that could be extended in a way, or because I think it's a good point to do this DMP, because as you all said, somebody is responsible in a consortium, and it's very good to discuss it. So I think this is really good. I thought it was a big improvement in our research, and we have people who know how to do it around us. So it's functioning this way. So I think we could maybe think about extending this DMP somehow. I don't know how we could discuss, but because there is already something existing, and we could just maybe update if we could.
Okay, anybody want to react to that?
Yeah.
Damien?
Yeah, just a quick reaction to that. The idea we have in the Human Brain Project is that data governance shapes the data management. You have to have a governance framework that will shape the way you manage the data. And for each particular project, there has to be specific governance principles or procedures that will be developed to guide the data management plan. For us in the HBP, we are at the final stage of the project, and we've had experiences with the first and second stages, and our data governance framework is now guiding updates of the data management plan we have. And I will encourage each cluster or each research collaboration to, first of all, start discussing data governance framework that will shape the data management plan. What happens if when you just do the data management plan without governance framework is that at the end of the day, you will still come back to it, because it will maybe at the middle of the project, you discover that there are a few things that have been forgotten. But with a data governance framework, it helps you to holistically take care of all the issues, both ethical, legal, technical issues that will come up or be raised in the data lifecycle of the project.
Okay, Mara, you also had your hand raised.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, it's to bring up a slightly different thing, but that is related. I mean, I know that neuroscience lags behind many other fields, as also Jan was mentioning, right? But there are global initiatives. I mean, there are other initiatives in other countries. And I think it would be good for us as researchers also to have a more global view on what is being done, so that the efforts can be concerted somehow. You know, there are all these, I don't remember how this initiative by the Allen Institute is called, but I think it's Neural Data Without Frontiers or something like that, no? So I think it would be good for the community in general, and also to allow cross-border projects to partner with other initiatives. This is first. Second thing, because we are now we have a brain project from the NIH. And one thing that they are also helping with, I mean, we are facing more and more bigger and bigger and richer data sets. And this is a lot of money for storage, simply for storage, right? Like for brain clearing, for example, this is 10 teras for each brain that you cleared, right? So I think it would be very important to be able to ask for funding for storage, right? And thank you, Martin. And also, for example, there are several institutes that work together to provide storage for this type of data, for neuroscience data. It's called BIL, B-I-L, right? So I think this would be also quite helpful, especially now that we are going more and more into, especially in the imaging field, but also in neurophysiology, for example, has the same problem, right? Thank you.
Yeah, Philippe, I saw you raise your hand, so probably you want to react to that.
Not really. I just wanted to allude briefly to one important question that has not been discussed so far. Of course, there are the legal, regulatory, technical issue around data sharing. But there is also, maybe the most interesting, how do we address the scientific validity of what is being done on the data as being shared? Over the years, all the clinical researchers here know that clinical research has been organized in a more rigorous way at different level, where you need to specify more and more precisely your scientific hypothesis, its rationale, your primary endpoint, and making sure you will not perform hundreds of comparisons to eventually get one finding with a p below 0.05 and report it. And then facing what we all know in clinical science is that so many findings are not reproducible, primarily because we have not control for all those issues. Obviously, when we start sharing data and keep it completely open, then there is the question, how do we control the production of spurious findings due to the fact that you might have hundreds of thousands of researchers who will, do hundreds of thousands of tests without any kind of control and supervision. So don't interpret me wrongly. I'm very much in favor of data sharing, but I think that dimension of having some control on scientific validity is extremely important and too often hidden by simply the legal or regulatory issues.
Stephen,
Yes.
we should allow only one more question, and that would be Sheila Meyer, and then we could have a 5 minutes break. Is that okay?
That's okay for me.
Fine, thank you.
Sheila.
So Sheila, you're next.
I was trying to put together some of the interventions.
Sheila, can you? Yes. We don't hear you. If you have to come closer to your mic or something like that.
There, maybe.
Better.
Is that better? Okay, good. Sorry. So I was trying to put together the different interventions on the data management plan, and as well the fact that the neuroscience is quite a big field, and the type of data that we have available is very diverse. So I think somehow we would need to understand. I mean, we cannot do all the developments on everything at the same time. And we have to decide on what is useful to be sharing and what is useful to receive as share as well. And so I was wondering whether it could be somehow useful if we were adding in the data management plan some kind of space for interaction in which you would be telling us and of course us funders, HPP, etc. I mean, this would be very important data for us to share. Or if I was a researcher, I would very much appreciate being able to access this data, and I'd need solutions there. I mean, our first idea would be to do like this, but is there anything else that you can propose? And this somehow that we create a channel that will go directly, I mean, to HPP or to whatever or the funders, so that we know where to put our efforts, because this is a huge challenge, right? Yeah, it's would that be useful, for example?
Yeah, very good point. I'm just gonna check if anybody wants to react to that now, because this was the last question. So Damien, you raise your hand, yeah?
Yeah, just a quick one. I think maybe Jan is the best place to talk about this, but that is why we have EBRAINS. We're developing EBRAINS as one of those repositories where you can trust, or with a responsible data governance framework we are setting up as the best practice in neuroscience, so that as researchers, at least within Europe, you can have a trusted repository where you can definitely put your data in.
Yeah, I see Jan is offline. So I propose then that we are a bit over time. So I propose we stop this first warming up session, and there's lots of more questions coming probably, but we'll come back to that after